Hello everyone, Ater here with Hangar 9, and this video is going to be dedicated to the process on a couple of steps that are required within the assembly of the Hangar 9 Pawnee Brave 20cc. Although the assembly on the 20cc Brave is pretty straightforward, there are still a couple of steps that may prove challenging to the modeler who may have never assembled an almost ready to fly aircraft before. And the first process that I'm going to be showing you all how to do is CA hinging. Now, CA hinges are a fairly common application among a lot of balsa and even foam aircraft for that matter. And the process is a little bit challenging whenever you first do it, but once you master it, it's super fast and super easy. The main thing that you want to watch is the runniness of the thin CA. It's very easy to escape and run along the surface and basically just ruin the looks of your airplane. You definitely don't want any CA streaks on the airplane. Like I said, it just ruins the look. Now, my process in CA hinging is one of many processes that a lot of people can do in order to correctly CA hinge their aircraft. Mine is honestly just pretty much the quickest way and easiest way in order to do so, and I've done it on a lot of scale airplanes and even 3D planes for that matter, and I just haven't had a failure yet with the way that I like to do it. And once again, it's just a very easy process. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get on into it. So the first thing that I like to visually inspect when dealing with CA hinges is I like to dry fit everything up and double check the gap between the flap and the wing, the flap and the aileron in the wing, just to make sure that the gaps are all even visually. This is to ensure that there is clearance between all the surfaces. If you accidentally offset one too much, then you might end up rubbing against the wing or rubbing up against the surface. So the main thing is to visually inspect the gaps and make sure that they are all the same. Next, I'm going to remove the aileron from the wing. As you can see here, we have all three CA hinges. Since there is no glue on them yet, we can go ahead and just pull them out from the slot. The next step is to stick a pin through the middle of the CA hinge like so. I used a corsage pin. T-pins are typically better, but if you don't have those laying around, a corsage pin like this is totally acceptable. The next step is to slide the CA hinge back into the center of the hinge slot on the wing. The purpose of the pin is to keep the CA hinge from sliding into the slot too far. Next, we can slide the CA hinges into the hinge slots on the aileron. Now is the time to verify that all three CA hinges are in fact in the slot. Once you have verified that all three gaps are even, you can go ahead and remove the pins. Next, you can locate your thin CA and make sure you have one of these precision tips. You definitely want to be as precise as possible when using thin CA on the CA hinges. Before applying any thin CA to the hinges, ensure that the spacing in the hinge gap is even across the entire surface. Next, carefully apply a couple drops of thin CA to each side of the CA hinges like so. Although thin CA is pretty watery and kind of difficult to work with, the CA hinge will essentially act as an absorbent and pretty much catch every single drop. However, it's definitely recommended to have a towel or cloth at the ready to catch any thin CA that might run down the surface. Once you have applied thin CA on each side of all three hinges, flip the surface over and repeat the process on the top side. With the glue completely applied to all three CA hinges, I like to move the surface back and forth just to keep things loosened up while the glue settles in. Now that the hinging is finished on the aileron, we can go ahead and move on to the flap. It's essentially the same process. Once again, I am verifying that the gap between the flap and the wing and the gap between the flap and the aileron are even. Once again, I am confirming that the hinge gap is even along the entire surface of the flap. And just like that, everyone, the CA hinging process on this wing is complete. Basically, the next step is going to be repeat this process on the other wing, followed by the elevator and rudder. Now, for those of you who are building the 20cc Brave, the elevator and rudder CA hinging is a lot easier because you don't have to worry about the spacing like you do on the wing. On the wing, as you saw in the video, you have to worry about the spacing between the flap and the aileron and the wings. You don't have to worry about any of that on the elevator and rudder, which makes it a whole lot easier. Now, for those of you who tuned into this video just to learn how to CA hinge or just looking for some basic tips, hopefully you all enjoyed this video and good luck with the rest of your build. Now, for those of you who are building the Pawnee Brave 20cc and want a couple more tips and build processes, stick around because we got one coming up next. The next assembly process on the Hangar 9 Pawnee Brave 20cc that can prove to be a bit challenging for those first-time ARF builders is the installation of the vertical and horizontal stab. So basically the elevator and rudder installation onto the airframe. This is challenging because it requires a significant amount of cutting, also working with epoxy, and a decent amount of measuring. So those three things combined can be a little bit time-consuming if you've never done this process before, but I'm going to be showing you all how to achieve the installation of the elevator and rudder. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get on into it. Before getting started, it is recommended to tape the elevators in place so then they do not move around during the measuring process. The first step is to set the horizontal stab into the notch like so. As you can see, whenever you fully push down, the horizontal stab sits relatively flush with this surface right here. Now it does protrude a little bit, but that is totally normal. That's essentially what you want. Just ensure that it is fully seated into the notch. You can visually confirm that the horizontal stab is correctly inserted into the notch by making sure that the horizontal stab and the bottom of the fuse and start of the wings are parallel. Once you seat in the horizontal stab into the notch, you can see that it moves back and forth within the notch. This is where the measurement comes into play so we can find out the correct location to glue the horizontal stab. With both wings installed on the fuselage, go ahead and take a yardstick, and this is where we are going to take our measurements in order to find the correct location to glue on the horizontal stab. Now, pick a reference point on the wing. I'm going to choose this corner right here on the trailing edge of the wing, essentially, and I'm going to pick the point right here on the horizontal stab. Once you have the yardstick lined up on the appropriate spots on the wing and horizontal stab, record the measurement that you get. After capturing the measurement on the same reference point on the opposite wing and opposite side of the horizontal stab, record the difference, and this is where you can slide the horizontal stab back and forth until you have a very, very close measurement between both sides. Not sure if you all can see on the screen, but I'm getting just over 33 5/8 of an inch on the airplane's left side. And over here on the airplane's right side, I am seeing just a little over 33 5/8 inches. I'm going to call it good. Up next, we can seat on the vertical stab and the rudder. Ensure that both sides of the vertical stab are flush with the back of the fuselage like so, and secure with a little bit of painter's tape just like that. Repeat the process on the other side, and also back here as well. Once again, verify that the vertical stab is sitting flush on the fuse in these 4 locations. The next step is to trace on the horizontal stab the location in which we will be making a cut on the ultra coat in order to peel it off, exposing the wood. You can also trace out the part where the vertical stab meets the fuselage like so. Flip the model over and trace out the bottom section of the horizontal stab like so. With the horizontal stab traced out, you can remove the vertical stab and horizontal stab. With the horizontal stab removed and your lines traced, it is time to peel away the ultra coat that is on the horizontal stab. Now, the key with this is making sure you have a number 11 X-Acto blade. Make sure it's fresh, and you just want to take your time, make sure that you don't push too hard, and cut into the balsa. Essentially, the best way to describe the cutting process is to let the weight of the X-Acto blade cut through the ultra coat rather than applying too much pressure and cutting through the wood. Be sure to take your time during this process, and don't be afraid to go over the same cut multiple times in order to result in a clean cut. Once you have cut out the shape on the horizontal stab, you can carefully peel up the ultra coat and slowly peel it away from the horizontal stab. If at any time you experience resistance in the ultra coat wanting to peel away, it's safer to go over it again with the X-Acto blade so you don't accidentally peel up too much ultra coat, exposing the wood outside of the bonding point. And just like that, the covering on the bottom side of the horizontal stab is removed. As you can see, I cut a little bit within the line, which is honestly a good thing. As long as you don't cut on the other side, exposing the wood on the surface, it essentially just makes the airplane not look very good. So as long as you remain within the line like so, you're good to go. Flipping the horizontal stab over, you can repeat the process to remove the covering on the top. Again, just let the weight of the X-Acto blade cut through the covering. If you put too much pressure and accidentally cut into the balsa, it's not necessarily the end of the world. You can take a little bit of thin CA and soak it into where you made a cut into the balsa if you really want to reinforce it. Otherwise, it's really not that big of an issue as long as you don't make a super hard cut. Next, we can cut off this covering where the vertical stab makes contact to the fuse. As you can see right here, the ultra coat kind of split into two different spots. Again, that's no big deal at all. All you have to do is go over it again with the X-Acto blade and peel off the remaining side of the ultra coat. With the covering removed and the wood exposed, go ahead and take some freshly mixed epoxy and a paintbrush and lightly apply a coat on either side of the horizontal stab. Reinstall the horizontal stab and elevator into its appropriate slot in the back of the fuselage. Next, you can carefully apply some epoxy on the rest of the mating surfaces on the fuselage. Reattach the vertical stab and rudder and secure them in place with some tape. At this point, the epoxy should still be curing and you can still freely move the horizontal stab in the notch. This is a great time to realign the horizontal stab so that the measurements line up on either sides of the wing and horizontal stab. With the vertical and horizontal stab installed on the fuselage with epoxy and held in place with the tape, allow the epoxy some time to dry. Once the epoxy is fully dried, the vertical and horizontal stab installation is complete. And just like that, everyone, the elevator and horizontal stabilizer, along with the rudder and vertical stabilizer, are successfully installed on the Hangar 9 Pawnee Brave 20cc. This is definitely the most tedious process within the whole build, and if you can accomplish this, then the rest of the build on the Pawnee Brave 20cc will be a breeze. Thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and could take away something that you can apply to many future builds in your modeling career. Enjoy the rest of your build on the Hangar 9 Pawnee Brave 20cc.